Well, hey there. It is now day 10 of our little seed starting adventure. I wanted to take you along and kind of show you how things are going and some things that we're going to be looking at tonight. So, as you can see, everything's going really well. Most of the plants are pretty much similar in terms of how much they've grown. This tray, they seem to be just a little smaller, but I mean, this is kale, right? It's a different variety compared to the cabbages and stuff. As far as the other tray of stuff I've got, not a whole lot of difference there. They're maybe slightly smaller because they don't have the benefit of the heat mat. I've just been putting them up on the worm bin underneath the fluorescents. I may swap them out with one of these trays here just to try to keep things a little more uniform. But overall, things are really healthy. What I wanted to touch on tonight is watering. In particular, how do I know when it's time to water? And there's a couple things here. I mean, I'm bottom watering, so there's a couple different ways you can water. Traditionally you can water from the top, by spritzing with a sprayer. Um, I've done it a variety of ways. I've used solo cups where I've dipped it into like a gallon of water, and then I've got holes drilled in the solo cups, different sizes depending on how much water I want to flow on top of the plants. Yeah. Yeah, early today. Yes. I may do two live streams today. Do one before dinner because dinner's in the oven. That was part of it. It's like, man, what am I gonna do? I could redeem the time a little bit here and get a little live streaming in. Eat dinner and then maybe I do a little bit more later tonight, depending on what's going on. Right. So yeah, how was your day at home today? Probably pretty good, huh? Well, while Tom's responding here, talking about watering and how do I know, and we were talking about different ways you could water. Again, the water on the top. Oh, that's awesome, man. Yeah. Well, maybe we can barter some stuff. Like I'll can green beans and tomatoes, and we'll see what else we can get. Maybe I can swap you some jars, get some of that celery and carrots, and then give you some of the stuff I'm growing when we get to that point. I think that worked out really well. So watering, I water from the top using solo cups. They have holes drilled in them like this to control the flow, whether it's one hole, a bunch of holes, big holes, small holes. It's a good way to control, I can dip a full cup to get a lot of flow, or I can do a half cup to get just a little bit. Yeah, we'll swap some canned goods this year. That'll work out real good. So I can water that way, or I can use my wand, water from the top. But I like watering from the bottom. Right now they're dry. I've let them dry out a little bit on purpose so I could demonstrate this. But how you can tell is you can look at the pot. And if the potting mix is starting to pull away from the sides, well, I mean, one, if it's bone dry, it's time to water. But if the potting mix is starting to pull away from the sides, depending on how much you got in there, it's time to water. Same with the bottom. You know, if it's dry, these are just a little damp, but could definitely stand some water. And basically all the pots are like that. There's one, you can kind of see the separation, you know, where it's starting to dry out. The plants aren't stressed yet because they're not, you know, wilting or trying to curl their leaves to protect stuff. So what I do is I just remove one of these. I got a gallon of water here. I'm going to give it about a half gallon. Maybe not even that. That's probably enough. There's about a quarter to a half inch of water in the tray now, and it's going to go throughout. And basically the pots will wick that up as long as the bottoms are coated, which you can kind of see the line there. That's perfect. It'll soak that up, capillary action. We're good to go with water. And if we need to add more, we can, but I don't want to overwater. Again, if I overwater, I can turn things into a bad situation where I can basically suffocate the plants because they need oxygen, create a anaerobic situation. We don't want to do that. So that's how I'm going about things tonight. I got 4 more trays I got to do. Add water to, and we'll kind of keep monitoring things. Probably another week under the grow lights, and then I'm going to try to move these outdoors a little bit because I've got other seeds I need to start, especially if I'm going to give Tom some plants this year. I need to get on the ball and create some space. Yeah, that's better. So try to get those outside and going, and then I think so. We'll tilt that back up. That's a little down. There we go. Create some space. The next thing I will start will be peppers, because I don't know about you, Tom, but they usually take about 8 weeks. Yes. You get that Mittleider garden going, man. And I've got, if your tiller's crapped out, I got 2 tillers. I got my big Craftsman that's got the rear tine, and then I got the, I think it's a Toro or Toro Build or something, that's a front tine driven one. And then I got a little Mantis. Basically it's not a Mantis, it's kind of a knockoff, but it's more of a cultivator, more like weed. Hopefully they'll start. I'm pretty sure the big tillers I won't have a problem there, but the small one I might have to baby that a little bit to get that going, because I didn't use it much last year. I don't know, maybe my dad put stabilizer in it. Yeah. You got basically the 3 beds, right? The 2 that you that were a little dilapidated last time I looked, and then I think you had a 3rd bed you were trying to make last time when you were, maybe that was 2 years ago, before you kind of let things go. But I'm gonna start peppers. Again, it takes about 8 weeks to get the peppers like a decent height to where the birds aren't going to peck them off, because what I found, yeah, that's enough space to grow some decent food for sure. I'm going to get my peppers going, because if they're not tall enough, what will usually happen, because there's a lot of birds at Dad's house, is they'll come down and they'll snip off the tops of the pepper plants if they're not hardy enough. And now one thing I do to discourage that is I stake them all early on and kind of put them up against the stake to kind of discourage them, so that the birds think, maybe look at that and think the plants are taller than what they really are, like not as they look bulkier, so maybe not as a likely target. Yeah, you can get some cats too. Though the birds help, they get all those insects. They help me with controlling some of the insects a little bit. I wish I'd do a little bit more. We'll get peppers started. We'll get them going, and then once they're going, I get the tomatoes started, and they're usually pretty quick, within like 6 weeks, 4 to 6 weeks. I got them decent size, where they're about 8 inches tall. They grow pretty quick. We'll get them out, and then in a couple weeks, probably get this cold weather stuff. Yeah. Yeah, I could get a bird feeder out there. Actually, we got, my sister did sunflowers last year, and I was surprised I didn't get as many birds that were pecking on them as I thought we would. We'll kind of see how that goes this year, but definitely want to try to encourage some of the wildlife out there to help me with the pest control and issues we might run into. Probably, maybe I'll do this tonight, get these boxes started with lettuce. We'll see what I got, what I want to do there. The other thing we're going to be doing later tonight is feeding the worms. I got these scraps here. Most of it's coffee grounds and tea bags and stuff we've kept for the last 2 weeks. But looking at the bin last night, the worms have worked down that pile of food that was in there initially, and I need to put some more in there to keep them happy, keep things humming. And then probably by later this spring, I may try to add another tray to this bin. I need to watch some videos, read up on how to properly bait the extra, the next bin I can actually get the worms to go up into it. I wasn't real successful in doing that last time. It was just a pain to harvest the castings. Yeah, there's some worms in there that are about that long. There's I'm trying to think of the name of the company. It was a Ohio company I got them from. It wasn't like, I'm trying to think of the name of the company that sells worms online. There's a couple different ones, but this one was Ohio, and they were in pretty good shape. And they sell all kinds, so I may get, depending on how well this goes, maybe even get another batch to try to accelerate this, because we generate a lot of food scraps, and it'd be kind of nice if I could turn that into potting mix, where at some point, instead of using, cut back a little bit on the Pro Mix and have more worm castings in the mix than what's there, and then have like basically free fertilizer, recycle stuff. And maybe fishing worms too, because there are a lot of people that fish around here. We'll kind of see how that all plays out. I'm also going to read up on the mint lighter method. It's been a little while. I need to refresh my memory on that. I got a one of my employees, she's thinking about doing a garden this year, and interested in possibly doing mint lighter, because she's going to do grow boxes, or maybe do like a pallet garden or something. So what I thought about doing was mixing up some weekly feed fertilizer mix, put it in a little mason jar for her, so that way whatever she does end up starting, she can feed the plants each week and probably get a pretty good result. The mint lighter is pretty foolproof for the most part, as far as helping the plants get the essential nutrients they need. So we'll kind of see how that plays out. And mix up my own stuff. Need to get a batch together. And again, with that, keeping the what is it? The Epsom salt separate. And mix it on the fly. When I actually go to do. At least that's what I've found. Maybe if you keep it in a sealed mason jar, that's not an issue. You don't have it getting wet, but keep it in a bag, because typically what I've been doing is I know, Tom, you got yours in a mason jar, but typically what I end up doing is dumping a big bag of NPK into the wheelbarrow and then putting the nutrient packet in there and mixing that all together real good, and then putting that in my container. And then I've got a separate bag of Epsom salt, and then basically figured out what the rough ratio is, so that way when I go to mix up, it's basically a pail like this, maybe probably about a half gallon of fertilizer. Yeah, that's what I do too. I got the 5 gallon with the screw lid, food grade deal on it to keep that. And it seemed like it still got wet though, depending on how full that 5 gallon was. So just keeping Epsom salt separate seemed to solve that problem. So mix it on a fly, get about whatever I think I'm going to use, which is about not quite a half gallon or so. It doesn't fill a pail up like this. It's a smaller pail. But mix a couple of tablespoons of the Epsom salt in with the rest of the mix. Get it mixed real good, and then go around and, was it a tablespoon per square foot or something? Yeah, that's another thing you could do is adding the lime to it. That does help, because what it does is it coats everything, including the salt, so you don't have, that's another way to kind of keep it dry, because the salt is what pulls the moisture out of the air, and that's what makes it soupy, mixed in with the other fertilizer for whatever reason. If salt's by itself, it's fine, but when it gets mixed in with the rest of it, there must be a chemical reaction or something, and it turns soupy. But putting a lime in there also works, because it coats everything and does help keep it dry. So that's a good point. Maybe I'll see if Dad, since he's got time on his hands and likes being on the go, maybe he'll go out to the feed store or whatever and get me some of that triple 15, so that we're ready to go this next year for all that. Because even though I'm kind of doing a hybrid approach, like soil-based beds and using the potty mix and all that to give these a start, I still use a Mitt Lighter weekly feed as a supplement, just to make sure everything's getting what it needs, until circumstances change. If I lived out there or closer, we would try to go to more I guess no-till or permaculture deal, low maintenance, but it takes some upkeep initially. Just I need to be out there more. Doing it this way, it's doesn't require maybe as much attention. Things are going to grow because they're getting everything they need up front, instead of worrying about trying to get the soil right, the microbiology, which long term is what I want to do. You're handling on the other end and making sure everything grows. So that's kind of the game plan. Yeah, no, for me, man, that's going to work out pretty nice, assuming I'm still employed and that at least on the front end. So it'd be what, $1,200 per adult and 500 per child, and I got 5 kids. We're trying to sit on that money and just let not do a whole lot in case things do get worse. Um, Instead of better, and then from what I understand, it may end up being more of like a um, more of a loan because they may net that against next year's taxes and stuff to help set the cost. Yeah, yeah, it's gonna be nice. It's gonna be potentially what, close to $5,000 probably. Because we definitely meet the income requirements. If they pass that, if it's I think it's like $1,200 adult, $500 per child. They may have changed it. I know, again, a couple people in Democrats in particular wanted a more generous plan where basically you're um, being covered for up to like 4 months, like full wages, and maybe they got that in the plan to adopt it. No, it's funny though. We had some friends because my daughter's looking at was it Cedarville, and we got some friends who the gal's a professor there or whatever, and she jokingly said, "Yeah, we could adopt your daughter, and then you get a break, get a break on the tuition. She basically get free tuition to go to school there, right?" I thought that was kind of funny. Um, and actually, I've read stories where parents have been real creative financially when thinking about sending their kids to school, whatever, like to the point of like even emancipating them so that they get more aid or it's a more sympathetic situation, whatever. They qualify for more stuff. Um, there's people that do that. We don't have any plans of doing that. Basically, we're kind of the mind that if you don't get the grants and the scholarships to get to where you want to be, definitely don't want you to, take out a ton of loans and then basically end up with a mortgage payment um, by the time you graduate. And, rather go to a community college or something like that, get all the gen ed stuff knocked out, and then maybe after a year or two doing that, see what you can do as far as getting into where you want to finish up, to save on tuition costs. I mean, even if you didn't get any scholarships or whatnot, it'd still probably be cheaper going that route as opposed to 4 years, um, the other way. So, and I don't know, a lot of employers anymore are willing to do on the, like, I hate to say about a lot of employers, like, even though, like, what do we call it, age discrimination and stuff like that. Maybe part of it is that, but part of it is just the reality of, like, people more, that are tenured and have the experience. It really just depends on the company, but it seems like a lot of companies are willing to train. I mean, you're either paying for the experience and the training that the person already has, or you're bringing them in on the lower end and then investing that amount in training and bringing them up over a period of time. You're either paying it up front by hiring someone that commands a higher wage, or you're paying it on the back end once they're in terms of onboarding them and training them up and getting them to where you want them to be. And it seems like, yeah, and that's the other concern too, is potentially they can make the rates go up unless you get somebody that's already like social security age, because then they can be on Medicaid or not Medicaid, Medicare. And Actually, we've got a fair amount of, like, I guess, quote unquote, people in that age bracket. Our company's kind of divided up in thirds. We've got those are on the higher end, that are already on, receiving Social Security and like on Medicare, like transitioned over, and then we got people in the middle like me, that are between the 30 and 50 range, and then we got the millennials and Gen Z, um, folks that are on the lower end. Um, but anyway, it seems like a lot of companies are more open to um, training for competency and stuff like that. As long as they got the right attitude and behaviors, and you know, they can learn. Um, they're more apt to bring somebody on the lower end of the pay scale and just train them into their own systems and all that, as opposed to paying for somebody with experience on the upper end. And typically, if we screen people out, if it's a situation like that, depending on the role, it's not that we don't hire people that have experience and are, tenured and all that, but a lot of times it's a business decision where, yeah, we'd love to have you. You got a great skill set and you got everything we're looking for, but we can only afford this, and you're here. Um, and it doesn't make sense for you to come down here to where we're at, because eventually that's just not a good fit. You're probably gonna look for something you're gonna bide your time till you get to where you really want to be anyway. Um, Sometimes situations like that, and then there's other positions where we're definitely looking for somebody that's, yeah, it's true. A lot of companies in that boat, where they just give everybody a shot and then just see if they pan out or not. And that's kind of two philosophies too. On that, there's companies that know they've just accepted that they're gonna have a certain amount of turnover, and so they'll go through a temp agency or, you know, just hire without really doing a thorough interview or vetting of skill set, and they're willing to, accept that cost, and then see who shakes out. Irrespective of like their experience or whatever, and so they're just kind of, hiring them and then turning them over, and they've got a crazy turnover rate, and their tenure is not very much because that's just their how they want to operate. I know, remember interviewing person who's a recent grad from University of Cincinnati who had been terminated from Dell, I think computer company or something, where they hired, I think it was like 20 people for this role, and fully expecting that, like, they were only going to retain maybe 10, and they figured that, you know close to 10 were going to drop out anyway or not pass the mustard test as they were going through, and they just accept that cost. And then there's other companies kind of like mine where we're more, we take our time and kind of like almost overcomplicate things, and multi-hurdle process and psychometric testing and all kinds of stuff, to make sure you get the right like person that's a good cultural fit and has the competencies and abilities and all of that to be able to do the job. What's questions like, can they do the job? Will they do the job? Will they grow? Will they get along with the team? And are their weaknesses manageable? Those are like the big questions we ask, kind of going through, and then look for evidence that they're going to be a good fit. And I don't know where the delta is on that. It remains to be seen, because I mean, especially the younger generation, and people are fickle anyway, and and it's hard to predict. I don't know if we're any better off investing that additional time or not at this point, because we've had a fair amount of attrition with the younger folks in particular that we take through that process and vet and look like they're going to be a good fit, and then it just ends up not being because they see something shinier and end up leaving us for something else. I don't know, but the one thing it does save investing all that time is you don't have near the personnel problems and like all the drama and stuff like that that other companies experience, because you know that by the time you get someone through that process, you get a high probability that you're not going to have issues with them because they're heading in the same direction and want the same things you want, share your values, all that good stuff. So I don't know. For me personally, it's been a learning experience, like learning how to facilitate all that process and like, ask good questions and stuff like that. That's funny. Yeah. Yeah, it's been I don't know. It's been interesting here lately with everything. We'll kind of see how things play out in the employment front, and I think, we got the wherewithal. We're going to make it through this thing unless it drags on for, a long, long time and like basically all the businesses kind of shut down, which, kind of thinking about today's climate, there's what's challenging is all the states are doing, they're handling it differently. You still have people traveling. They really don't have a good idea of the scope of this thing because they're not allowing people to get tested unless they've already been to a doctor or physician and they've met the criteria, like they've traveled abroad or whatever, or they've got all the symptoms, symptomatic of the COVID stuff. And then they send them you have to go to another site or basically a mobile testing unit with the doctor's note in order to get tested. If you don't have a doctor's note, like a doctor's order to be tested, you're not going to get a test. And again, it's difficult to get that note from what I understand, unless you're like a healthcare worker or like they've kind of prioritized, who they're going to test and who they're not. And unless you meet certain criteria, you're just not. So they don't really even know the scope of this. And now, even with all the like social distancing and containment policies and all this stuff, talking to someone at work, China, the only way that got better is if anyone had the symptoms, or they not only isolated them, but they quarantined everyone that they had close contact with, like had spent extended period of time with, family members, things like that, and isolated them. There's like quarantine them as well to see if they develop symptoms, try to control the spread of it. And they could do that because they're authoritarian communist society, so they can, the people are conditioned to follow orders, and like they're used to that form of government. Whereas here, unless you could explain the why behind the what, it's going to be difficult to get everybody on board with that. And even still, you're going to have a lot of people that just are independent and are not going to comply just because that's the choice they can make, you know. So I think this thing's gonna drag on for a while. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe we'll get a reprieve this summer. Maybe the virus is gonna be like sensitive to heat and all that, and it's gonna be more of a seasonal thing, and it's gonna, subside or whatnot. But I I think it's probably gonna get worse before it gets better for sure. It may come down to like they call it the National Guard, and have a strict enforcement policy and really lock things down for a period of time to try to um, snuff this thing out or control it until they can get a vaccine and then start inoculating people so that you can prevent the spread that way too. I don't know. It's gonna be interesting. So, well, I may jump back on here later tonight, but I hear footsteps, which means that they're probably ready for me to come upstairs and hang out with family and eat dinner and all that good stuff. But we'll see. I may not. We'll see how the evening goes here. But anyway, kind of see how it plays out. Now I'm gonna finish watering these trays in. We got 4 more to do, and then maybe later tonight we'll feed the worms and start some lettuce and see how the evening plays out. So, guess that's it for now. The next time, happy gardening.